What did he say were the issues? Did he get a diagnosis at this age?
What he said at the time was that children, because they're developing, that they very rarely placed serious diagnoses on them, something like bipolar illness or schizophrenia or something, because it wasn't clear that children really suffered from those illnesses or just some precursor of those illnesses. And basically what happened was, once we got in to see this very talented, actually, psychiatrist at Mass General, who did all of these tests and so on, and said that he needed to be seen 3 times a week, but he was too busy and couldn't see him. He gave us a list of 3 people and said, call these people up. And so we called them up, and 2 of the 3 couldn't take him, and the 3rd person took him on as a patient, and he was a Gestalt therapist. And it was all about talking. And as the child was seeing him 3 times a week, what we saw in very palpable ways was our child getting sicker and sicker and sicker right before our eyes. Despite all of this therapy, he wasn't improving. More situations seemed to distress him, and he seemed to be unhappy. He seemed to not have many friends. He seemed to be struggling with life, and he was in talk therapy with the Gestalt therapist for almost a year. And we confronted the therapist and said, we really think our child is not getting better. We think, he's getting sicker and sicker. And you could see that the therapist himself was pretty scared and realized that he hadn't been able to help him. And he said something like he was the only child that he had ever worked with who he couldn't engage in play, that he couldn't get him to work on a computer game or talk with them about a board game. And so he then gave us some other recommendations of other people, and the whole process started again. And what happened was that he had a suicide crisis in 5th grade. So there was a doctor that he was seeing who pulled us through that. That doctor one day said, this is getting to be a very serious situation, and I think he's a serious suicide risk. And at the time, he was medicated up, took all kinds of drugs, and was going to be institutionalized, and talked his way out of it at the very end. And he was scared. He was really scared about going into the hospital. And he said, I'll behave differently. This was just an act I was putting on. I'm not going to do this. And he ended up not being institutionalized, but was put on antipsychotic drugs, very, very strong tranquilizers, all kinds of things. And then we made it through the crisis. We weathered the storm. And he was then in therapy for about another year. And then it got so it was interfering with in the summer and the plans for his summer camp. So he took the summer off. And he really seemed to be doing better. And so he went through 2 years in middle school, did very well in school, seemed to have a lot of friends, had kind of found his way socially. We were so relieved, and we thought the problem hadn't gone away, but he was really coping, and we were very optimistic how well things were going in middle school. And so this was, say, 12 and 13.
And was he ever given a diagnosis?
No, in all the years of treatment, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth, he was never given a diagnosis.
What did these doctors say?
Sometimes they would say it might develop one day into bipolar, it might develop one day into schizophrenia. They never gave him a diagnosis.
After summer camp, you're saying he took about 2 years off. He didn't go to therapy. He seemed to be doing better.
He seemed to be doing better. That's when he was a straight-A student in a very rigorous school. He had lots of friends. He was invited to lots of parties. Things seemed to really be going well for him. And he then went into 9th grade, transitioned to a new school, to the upper level school, and it was a new environment for him. I think he was in very challenging courses. I think socially it was because it's uncharted territory. I think he was in over his head.
His behavior changed?
No, I think that what happened was that he got into some complex social situations that he didn't quite know how to cope with, and he didn't have a lot of coping mechanisms that were going to help him. And I think at the same time, he was in classes that were very academically challenging. And so basically what happened was, from going from a 7th and 8th grade that we thought had really been very idyllic, he went into 9th grade and he was only there 2 months when he took his life. If you look at his whole life and everything I've told you, it's not surprising given that we started worrying about this when he was age 10. But when it happened, it seemed to come from out of the blue. And it was only after talking to other people and understanding more of what had happened in school that we began to get a sense of the pressure that he must have been under.
So what happened?
He had started a free Tibet club at school and had suggested a big fundraiser, and he went to the fundraiser that day and was selling free Tibet posters and going around talking to people, and then he went home and hung himself. And he left a very long note and said, don't worry about me, I'll be okay. We found the note and then called the police, and the police came and found him. He was in the backyard.
So what do you think the lessons of your story are?
I think we need a triage system, and I think we need something that when you go to the great medical institutions, that I think that there has to be some way to diagnose these children and then find out how to provide care for them. That it's one thing to go and say, yes, I think you need to see somebody for 3 days a week, and good luck, I hope you can find someone. As opposed to, I think if you present yourself at a cancer institute and you have cancer and a really difficult type, the next step is that they take you on as a patient and they help you battle that cancer. And here I felt that we were battling it on our own. I felt as if the metaphor was we had our hat in our hand and we were walking from place to place to place, trying to beg someone to treat this child. And all the while, we loved him dearly, and he was such a special, special kid. And we just couldn't get either the attention, or we couldn't get the quality of treatment that he needed. But I've made peace with it by feeling that I really think that even had we found people that we really thought we had a lot of respect for and that were really trying to help him, I'm not sure they could have succeeded.
Cynthia Montgomery's son Bjorn took his life in 1999 when he was 14.